Grant Holmes has a partially torn UCL, but he's not having surgery. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, part of the Believe Podcast Network and proudly presented to you by FanDuel. We are your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. Another day where the newsletter and podcast don't overlap. I actually took yesterday's talk about Hurston Waldrop, expanded that a lot more in the newsletter with details about the changes to his arsenal, a lot of the different stuff that he's doing, some of my concerns, the things we like, things we don't like, all of that. So go check that out, bravestoday.com, free or paid, worth knowing. We got a lot of injury updates from manager Brian Snitker yesterday. So what's Spencer Schwellenbach doing? Reynaldo López, Ronald Acuña Jr., Chris Sale, all those guys. But I want to start off with Grant Holmes, because the assumption, and what I was hearing privately, quietly, whatever, was that he had a UCL injury. And it turns out he does. But he's not immediately choosing to have surgery to repair it, either a Tommy John surgery or an internal brace. And I think it's at least a little bit of a defensible decision on his part. So let's talk about what he's trying to do, the likelihood of it working, and the prognosis here. And I want to back up just a little bit about UCL tears in general, because I think there's a lot that people don't really know about the ulnar collateral ligament in the elbow. And there's a lot we don't know on Grant Holmes' situation, right? Like, we don't know the location of the tear. We don't know the severity of the tear and all of that. We just know it's at least partially torn. And, like, the thing to know about this is the UCL is like 4 to 5 centimeters long and like 4 to 5 millimeters wide. It is not very big. If we think about the elbow and everything, it's not very big. And again, there's 3 separate parts of it. And depending on where the tear is it in the anterior bundle? Is it in the posterior bundle? Is it in the transverse ligament? This is something, the anterior bundle, let's think about the elbow. So if you're looking at your elbow in a mirror, the UCL is actually like a triangle shape. The anterior bundle is on top, and it connects the upper arm to the lower arm. This is typically what's reconstructed at surgery. This is what we think of when we think of Tommy John surgery. There's also the transverse ligament is the matching piece that's on the bottom. And it only is on the bottom or the lower arm. It doesn't connect to the upper arm at all. The posterior bundle is on the back side of the elbow, relatively speaking, and it fills in the gap between the two. So the anterior bundle, again, that's the top part of the elbow up here, where think about if you were to go from the bottom of your bicep to your forearm, that is the anterior bundle. That is typically what is reconstructed at surgery. But there's other stuff in there. It's not just this one little tiny thing. There's other stuff in there. Right? Again, the transverse ligament is on the bottom, and it connects from the elbow towards, it sticks out towards the hand, and it goes to where the anterior bundle meets. It's only on the lower arm. The posterior bundle fills in the back of the elbow here. Depending on where this tear is and how big it is, Grant Holmes may still have that main piece that we all think of that gets the majority of the load, the anterior bundle, intact. He may still have that. We don't know exactly where this is. We also don't know the type of tear it is, right? We all just think of, hey, you get that pop and it's ripped off the bone and you're done. Is it torn at the bone? Is it torn in the middle of the ligament and you have both of the anchor points into the bone? I say anchor points into the bone. That's trying to simplify this a little bit. Is that still intact? Sometimes you don't have the pop, which is called an acute tear. You have what's called a chronic tear, which is repetitive throwing, accumulated forces over time. The ligament degenerates to a point where it frays and there is some amount of the ligament that is no longer intact. 5%, 10%, whatever. I remember talking to a sports surgeon from the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York at the time of Spencer Strider's tear. I was working for Sports Illustrated. I reached out to them. We got connected. We did a bunch of stuff so I could write some stories on it. And one of the things that he explained is you don't have to always have surgery. And that's what makes some of this so tough, is where the tear is, the type of tear it is, the severity of the tear. There are legitimately non-operative options you can do to rehab it. Now, most pitchers in Major League Baseball just go with the repair, right? Sometimes it's the full Tommy John, which is where they take a tendon from either your wrist or your leg, and they use that to, in essence, replace the UCL. It's like the forearm or the hamstring is where the tendon comes from. And they're just replacing the torn part of the UCL with this tendon. Sometimes they go with the internal brace, which is, I've talked about this before when Grant first got hurt, the tape-like suture that kind of goes in place of the anterior bundle, or kind of it duplicates the anterior bundle, because that's the main force. That's the main part that withstands the most force, has the most force applied to it. In essence, they give you an artificial second anterior bundle. Sometimes you do both. Sometimes you just rest and rehab. There is precedent for pitchers to rest and rehabilitate with non-operative options and get back on the mound. It is true that it is a lot less common. Like, the odds of it working are lower than having the surgery. There are some very notable names that made this work. Roy Halladay, the late Hall of Famer, 2006. He had it partially torn. He rehabbed it without surgery. And then he had, I think it was 5 consecutive top 5 Cy Young finishes. Now, I'm not saying Grant Holmes is Roy Halladay, but there is a path here. Irvin Santana, who had a brief stint with the Braves, he had a partially torn and he rehabbed it and he got back on the mound. Masahiro Tanaka, I believe, actually pitched without a intact UCL for a while. Like, it had torn years before and he had just worked through it. It's not out of the realm of possibility that this could work. It's also not incredibly likely. But I think the big thing here, if you think about this in the context of where Grant Holmes is, and he got 2 doctors. He talked to 2 different doctors who both said that he could try to rehab this. And from the quotes that we have, from what Brian Stidker said, he is open to having the surgery if this does not work, right? And this is typically this is rest from throwing. This is strengthening the forearm. That's the forearm muscles. That's the primary thing that can absorb and take stress off of the UCL, right? The stress that goes down the arm and through the elbow. having stronger forearm muscles can reduce the amount of stress that has to go through the UCL. So, strengthening the forearm, platelet-rich plasma therapy. There are things that he can do to try to rehab this. And there is a precedent for rehabbing instead of surgery and being good. A lot of people, obviously, end up having the surgery anyway. And the nightmare scenario is something like what the Phillies had last year, right? Top prospect Andrew Painter had a tear in spring training. And he tried the rest and rehab first, ended up having the surgery over the summer. And so rather than being able to potentially debut this year, he still has not made his major league debut. He's off the IL now. He's pitching in AAA, and part of that's their rotation's really good. But because he waited to have the surgery until mid-year, he didn't even make a rehab start until like late April of this year. When if he had the surgery in March, February, March, when the injury happened, he could have been ready to go for it. He could have been pretty much ready to go earlier in the year. There's also the context of, like, with Holmes doing it now, if you think about this surgery being a 12 to 15th month return, he's out for 26 anyway. He has the advantage of the winter here, right? If he has the surgery now, he's about 18 months removed when spring training starts. If he waits and has the surgery in October, right? If he gets 2 months of rest and then tries to start throwing and sees if he can do anything or not. If he has the surgery in October, if he's out 12 to 15 months, he's back for spring training of 27. Either way, the timing works. So why not try to rest and rehab this? I will say that I understand his desire to not lose an entire season. If you think about where he is as a player, okay, he took a decade just about to get to the majors. He's almost 30 years old, and he's losing a full season of his prime when he doesn't have that long in his prime compared to other players. Like, he hasn't made enough money to just be like, yeah, I'll give up a year of my prime. And missing a year plus of playing time means that when he gets to arbitration, all he has is the partial season as he returns from Tommy John before arbitration. The money you make in your first year of arbitration dictates all 3 years of arbitration. So I get it from Grant Holmes' perspective. Likelihood is I'm out till 2027 anyway. But if there's a 5% chance that this works, let's do this. I get it. I hope it does work. I absolutely do. I do hope it works. It's not a full tear, it's a partial tear. Again, we don't know the severity. Is it 5%, 15%, whatever? I've been told by doctors, even something like a 1% tear is viewed by a lot of surgeons in the same light as a 25% tear, right? That you're going to need surgery eventually. But again, if there's a 5% chance of this working, 1 in 20, which feels like that's probably, anecdotally from looking at the database I have access to, it feels like 5% is maybe the success rate on the rest and rehab. If that works for him, great. And if not, he still has the time to get the surgery and not jeopardize his 2027 season. In just a minute, we got updates on some guys who could be coming back soon and some guys who might not. We'll discuss that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about some of the injuries to this pitching staff and player group in general. We do have one as well on Ronald Acuña Jr. And he's one of the two players that it looks like we could see back this year. Ronald is getting treatment on the calf strain. He did hit in the batting cage today. Like, the issue with Ronald is not being able to hit, it's running, right? So the Braves officially do not have a timetable for Ronald Acuña Jr. He is officially day-to-day, but they have decided, according to Brian Sitker, they are going to wait until he is completely pain-free before he is activated, which makes sense if you think about it, right? There's no reason to rush him back. If this was September, heading into October, and it was the postseason, was ahead of you, there would be a logical end date where, hey, even if he's 90%, we got to get Ronald back for the postseason. That's not where we are. So they are going to completely wait for him to be pain-free. But again, he's able to hit, he's able to swing a bat. It's just the running, both defensively and on the base paths. Chris Sale is also likely to come back this year. Remember, he went on the IL June 21st. It was retroactive to June 19th with a fractured rib cage. He threw a bullpen side session on Monday. And the way to think of this, they call them sides, right? He threw a side. A standard bullpen session is 20 to 50 pitches. You're throwing everything. Your goal out there is to, maybe you want to work on the movement of a specific pitch, make sure you feel good, all that kind of stuff. A side is like a more focused bullpen session that's shorter typically and more concentrated on a specific thing. So like, for example, a side, you may be throwing exclusively changeups because you're trying to improve your changeup. Whereas a bullpen, you're throwing everything, make sure your arm feels good, make sure all the movement looks like it's supposed to look. So a side session is a targeted version of a bullpen, right? He threw a side session to see how he was feeling with the rib cage and everything. The next step is live batting practice. Now, Snit did not say how many times he'll need to do live BP or anything like that. I'm assuming they'll send him out for a rehab start. Snit did not give us any specific details on that, obviously. But it really does feel like Chris Sale is working to make sure he can get back this year. The obvious, or the logical decision to make when Sale returns is who has to go to make that work. And I think at this point, you would be looking at somebody like an Eric Fetty would probably be out so that you could bring Chris Sale back. Again, they're not going to rush Chris Sale back. The goal here would be, we want him to be able to get back on the mound before the end of the season so that he is confident going into the offseason that he is healthy. Again, he missed the wild card round with the back spasms last year. He stuck around Atlanta before he went home to Florida. He stuck around Atlanta and got on the mound and threw a sim game. I believe it was Friday of the wild card week. Yeah, because we were talking to Alex Anthopoulos on Friday morning, doing the postseason discussion with him and Snit about everything. And Sale was on the mound in Truist Park at the exact same time. Yeah, he could look out his window and see Sale down there throwing, because Sale wanted to have that certainty of knowing, hey, I'm healthy, I'm back, before he shut it down for the offseason. So the idea here would be, can we get Chris Sale back? So both of those guys could return, and that would be nice. On the Austin Riley thing, within 30 seconds of turning the recording off yesterday is when the news broke that Riley was going back on the IL. He actually told everybody that he felt the first little bit of issues on Saturday when he made that diving attempt to his left on the RBI single through the left side. And then he stretched, warmed up everything on Sunday, and wasn't having any issues pregame. So they put him in the lineup. And then when he made that lunging, diving attempt of Ellie De La Cruz at home and got him and tagged him out, that's when he really felt it. And so that's why he is out. Brian Sitker said there's no date on when they have to get him back. The main goal now is to make sure it is fully healed before he returns. They don't want to bring him back and it get re-injured again. So I imagine they're going to be a little bit more patient, and it feels like we're going to get a little bit more of an extended look of Nacho Alvarez at third base. Which I wanted to see what he would look like defensively at second. When Riley was activated and Nacho went back to AAA, he played in 7 games exclusively at second base. They only used him at second. Now, he went 3 for 27. He didn't hit very well. But I was curious what his defense would look like at second, because his defense at third has been much better than his defense at second. And again, we saw the second base defense last year, third base defense this year. But I do think it's more important to see what his bat looks like in the majors than to see what his AAA defense looks like at second base. He went 1 for 3 last night. He did hit a double. I think that was the second inning. 1 of 3 Braves hits in that entire game. 6 total hits for the entire game from both teams. Both teams got a homer, but the difference is Atlanta's was a leadoff homer with Jurickson from Jurickson Profar. Theirs was a 3-run homer. They had 2 guys on base when it happened. That was the difference. Both teams had 3 hits and 1 homer, but that was the difference there. If we end up having to get Nacho Alvarez for the rest of the year at third base, I want Riley to come back, right? Just same thing as a position play, as a pitcher. I want him to have the confidence that he's healthy. But I do think that getting the knowledge of how Nacho's bat is going to fare in the majors is also important to get from the perspective of decisions for next year on, is he an option if either Ozzie Albies is not back or gets injured next year? Is he an option for second base? Again, Snit talked about he feels like he would be a utility guy at the major league level, which tells me Snit doesn't really think he's going to be a major league regular one day. But same time, Snit's not going to be here next year, right? Our question is going to be with the next guy in charge. How do they view Nacho Alvarez? How does the front office view Nacho Alvarez? How does AA think Nacho Alvarez can fit into the next competitive Braves roster? And I think by seeing what he can do offensively, we'll get an idea of that in the next, I'm going to assume it's probably a month for Riley. Simply because the last one was 2+ weeks, and it wasn't enough. They're going to take it slow, probably going to be a month. In just a second, we did get some unfortunate updates about other pitchers for Atlanta that we may not see this year. Let's talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, going over some injury updates we got from Atlanta and from manager Brian Snitker prior to yesterday's game. One of the frustrating ones here is Spencer Schwellenbach is not throwing, right? He had a fracture in his elbow that he assumed came from a deliberate effort to increase his velocity over the summer. But he is not yet throwing. He is officially on the 60-day IL, but can return prior to the end of the season. Now, when you look at the timing, it would be something where it would have to be like the last week of the year. Like he'd make one of your final couple starts of the season before everybody packs it up and goes home. But again, it's the knowledge of knowing he was able to make it back. He's not yet throwing. So now, like you're in a situation where he last pitched June 28th. So he's been shut down for about 5 weeks now. And let's say he starts throwing in 2 more weeks. You have to get him to play and catch. You have to get him to throwing off a mound, side sessions, live BP, bullpens, rehab starts. It doesn't feel like the calendar is going to work out for Spencer Schwellenbach to come back this year. Now, it's possible they activate him the final week of the season and let him pitch an inning in relief, right? You can minimize that length of time if you're not trying to build him back up to pitch multiple innings. I personally don't know if they'll do that or not, because typically when you're pitching in relief, it's a little bit higher intensity. And ramping up his intensity is what injured the elbow in the first place, he believes. So you may see him come back late the final week of the season and pitch an inning in relief or something, but it feels like Spencer Schwellenbach is probably done for the year. Reynaldo López is throwing, but all he's doing is playing catch. So he hasn't yet advanced to throwing off of a mound. Again, the progression here is you play catch, you throw off of a mound, but you're not on the pitching rubber. You're just the elevated going down the mound. Then you go up and you're pitching off the mound. I'm sorry, it's playing catch, then it's long toss. Then you're throwing off of a mound. Then you're pitching off of the mound. Get the side session thing in there. Then you do live BP. Then you do bullpens. You're not at the point where it feels like Lopez is going to be able to come back and be a starter this year. Maybe he does come back and pitch an inning in relief, pitch a little bit of relief the final week or so. And I talked about this yesterday. I do think it's possible, depending on what Atlanta does in free agency this offseason, with this impressive and robust pitching class that we're expecting to have, right? Dylan Cease, Framber Valdez, Michael King, Zach Gallen. There's a bunch of bigger names on the pitching side available this year. You may not need Reynaldo López in your rotation. They may say, hey, you've had 3 injured list stints since you've tried to return to being a starter, including one that knocked you out for the entire season. He's made 1 start this year. So we're going to have you be our closer. And again, the contract's not bad enough where you can't have him be your closer. So it's possible that's something that they do. They say, hey, we're going to stick you in the pen. We're going to have you be a reliever in 2026. You're our new closer. But it just doesn't feel like he's going to make it back. Joe Jimenez is really interesting to me because we got reports a month ago that he was throwing bullpens down in Northport. So he's been on a mound. He's been throwing for a while. My assumption here is either he's throwing bullpens, but it hasn't looked exactly the same as they want or expect it to look, and that's why he's not progressed, or we're like days away from getting the announcement that he is going on a rehab outing and he's going to pitch in an actual live game. Complex League is over, so he can't pitch in a game in Northport. He can pitch in back league stuff, instructional stuff. He can't pitch an actual game in Northport, but they could send him to either single A or high A for a game or two, and then just keep running him up the ladder, send him to double A, send him to triple A, and then bring him back. So we did not get an update on Joe Jimenez yesterday from SNIT, but I still feel like, given the fact we knew he was throwing bullpens a month ago, we should be able to see him this year. My question is just when. And if they've just been letting him work in instructs and all of that, we could get an announcement that he's on a rehab outing in the next week or two. I wouldn't be shocked. The way that this show's gone in the history of this, as soon as I hit stop on the recording, they'll go ahead and say, hey, he's on a rehab outing today. He starts a rehab outing in high A Rome. Who knows? So that's fun there. One other bit of news that came yesterday at the same time that we saw Riley go in the IL and Nacho Alvarez come back up. They also optioned Jared Kelenic back to Gwinnett and replaced him with infielder Jonathan Ornelas. So what that tells me is, one, we're absolutely right to assume that Kelenic is probably being non-tendered in the offseason. He's making over $1 million, and he has 3 years of arbitration left. They clearly do not think of him as a major league player. Eli White's getting everyday running time. I am perfectly fine if they say, hey, we are going to let Eli White play every day, and then our backup outfielders are now Luke Williams and Jonathan Ornelas. Ornelas has 470 career minor league innings. He's played center. He's played left. If you've played center, you can step into right for a couple innings if they need it. Luke Williams has played everywhere except, I believe, catcher. And for a while, he was Atlanta's emergency catcher. Right? They have a third one now in St. Leon, so they're fine. But again, I think this is just reinforcement that Jared Kelenic is not in Atlanta's plans going forward. Again, I expect him to be non-tendered this offseason, and he'll probably have to sign a minor league deal somewhere else. So, this has been Braves Today for Tuesday, August 5th. Do me a favor, listening on audio, leave a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Also, don't be afraid to check out bravestoday.com. Free or paid, those subscriptions help us out a ton. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.